Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of the Audit Committee for the new municipal year. The first item is election of chairman. Is there a nomination?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Rachel Burgess, please.
And is there a seconder, please? Are there any other nominations? Okay, Rachel, the chair is yours.
Thank you very much, everyone, and welcome to the Audit Committee. So the second item on the agenda is the appointment of a vice chair. Do we have any nominations for vice chair? Yes. Do we have a seconder?
Okay, Rachel.
And I'll second that.
Okay. Do we? All those in favour? Okay. Anyone against? Okay. So congratulations, Councillor G. You are the vice chair. Thank you. Okay. Do we have any apologies?
Councillor Harper.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 4, which is minutes of the previous meeting. So we've got 2 sets of minutes to approve this evening. The first will take the 2nd of February. Anyone got any comments on those? Are we happy to approve those as a correct record? All those in favour? Those were there? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I don't think anybody else needs to be on second.
Okay, okay, yeah, fair enough. Okay. All right, and we've also got the minutes of the extraordinary meeting on 30th of March. Are we happy to take those as a correct record?
Yeah,
I was at that meeting and I'm happy to propose them.
Okay, any objections?
I wasn't at the meeting, so as Maria said, we can't really prove them one way or another.
Okay, all right, thank you. I just had, are there any matters arising from those minutes? I just had
No.
one, sorry, Maria, do go on.
yeah.
I don't have any comments, but I can't see how we can proceed without approving them as minutes. Do we have any advice on, I was actually at that meeting, John, but not the first one. Presumably we can approve them even if nobody was there, if one person was there.
So the minutes have been circulated. They've been out there for some time. So
Right,
I think
great.
everyone's had a chance to read them. And if everyone's happy.
The problem is, Neil, we weren't at the meeting, so we don't know whether they're a true record in that meeting, so it's impossible for us to approve them.
Councillor G?
Yeah, I would suggest that actually they're on the web, so anybody who had an interest could have had a look at these and therefore approve them. So assuming that nobody has got any objections, I think we should be able to approve them, should we not?
So I'm happy to contact the members who were there outside the meeting, and if there are any comments, we can bring them back to the next meeting, but we can work on the assumption that they're approved.
I'm happy with it.
Everyone happy? Any objections? Okay, we'll proceed on that basis then. Thank you for that, Neil. I just had one question actually arising from the minutes. There was a comment about an independent member, which I think is a really good idea. Is there any update on the progress on that?
I think that was left with Andrew Moulton and the chair, so I'm not aware of any updates. So I think it may be for you to pick it up with Andrew as we go forwards.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, okay. Oh, sorry.
So, sorry, Rachel, I can help with the recruitment of an independent member.
Yep, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so Andrew's been working on that since the meeting, and we've drafted a job description for them and are looking to recruit them. Obviously, we were awaiting the election of a chair of the Audit Committee to commence that recruitment, but I can send you some information following this meeting.
Thank you, that's great. Okay, so the next item is public questions. Do we have any public questions?
None received, Chairman.
Any member questions?
None received.
Okay, so the first substantive item that we have on the agenda is a verbal update on the 2021 accounts. Could I just point out, I know it's obvious, but there are lots of new people here. So if you, in your update, if you could bear that in mind, some of the background may not everyone may not know some of the background. So over to you. Is that Helen?
Yes, I'll go first, and then I'm sure Graham will have some words to say as well. And thank you, Chair. So taking into account your comment in terms of the background, the key point to start with is that the audit of the accounts for 2020-21 is not yet completed. This has been reported to previous committees, but obviously a number of the members of this committee have not been involved in that. But there are two substantive issues outstanding. One is receipt of the assurance letter from the pension fund auditors of Royal Borough, Windsor and Maidenhead. And the second is a national issue that has affected all councils, which relates to infrastructure assets. Aside from that, all of the substantive audit work has been completed. Taking each of those issues, the first one in terms of the pension fund, we have been advised by Deloitte that they will be issuing their updated letter to us as the auditors for Wokingham, probably at some point in September. It's not entirely clear if that will be earlier September or later September. But once we have that, we will be able to conclude our audit work on the pension fund liability and assets that are set out within the accounts. To provide a little bit of background for members who may not be familiar with this, there is a protocol in place between audit firms that where we rely on information from the pension fund, the auditor of the pension fund will carry out a programme of work on which we can rely as auditors for Wokingham for the elements that are included within your financial statements. The work is largely completed by the pension fund auditor, but they have not completed it sufficiently fully to issue a letter that is free from caveats. And whilst we have had a final draft of the letter, it continues to contain a caveat that effectively means we can't rely on it until that is removed. So that's the first issue. The second issue, which relates to infrastructure assets, is an issue that emerged in discussions between audit firms a few months back and has then led to an additional consultation by SIPFA, or an emergency consultation is probably the best way to describe it, by SIPFA about how to deal with that in the short term, whilst they look for a solution in the longer term. That consultation closed probably 2 to 3 weeks ago, and I know that there would have been a number of responses from audit firms and from individual councils and other interested bodies. Unless Graham knows differently from me, at this stage, we don't have any indication as to what the outcome of that will be. Notwithstanding that, we are having some discussions, and we have a call set up later this week with Graham and his team to talk about what information Wokingham has available and how that might, what our options might be depending on where the consultation lands and how that will take forward. So for that element of the work, it is as yet unclear as to when we will be able to complete it, but we will be looking to complete the work as soon as possible once we have a way forward. That's where we are on the 2021 audit. As a consequence of that, we haven't yet started our work for the year ending 31st of March 2022. We are talking with Graham and his team about how the timing of that work and the resourcing for that work and how we can continue to learn the lessons from 2021. And to that extent, we have had a lessons learned exercise that we carried out between the audit team and also the finance team and more broadly within the council about what worked well, what can we do to continue to improve. And we will build that into our audit planning and also the delivery of the audit. I think that's probably all I wanted to say in terms of introduction. I'm happy to take any further comments, but Graham, I don't know if there's anything that you would want to add.
Thank you, Helen. Without stating the obvious, I think the only thing to add was that at the last committee there was a presentation of audit's report, which was heard and discussed at the committee. So anybody wanting to catch up, it's probably worth sort of looking through that, and you can see the findings from Helen and her team in terms of 2021 report. As she says, in essence, signed off and agreed, other than those remaining outstanding elements that are beyond our control. And and EY's control.
Thank you, Graham. Sorry, if I may just add to that, we will circulate a final audit results report and bring that back to committee along with the financial statements. I think that's the other point probably, Graham, you and I talked about saying, and we've both managed to forget.
And I guess I would just say from my perspective as CFO, obviously I don't disagree with anything that's been said. It's just frustrating. One of the issues is a national issue, which we can only join in terms of making our concerns or responding to surveys. And the other one is a Berkshire, a regional issue. So it is difficult because, of course, we all want to get those accounts signed, but all we can do is try to influence, but often our ability to influence is very small.
Okay, thank you very much. Who would like to speak on this? I've got Councillor Maher and then Councillor Davies.
Hello, good evening. It's Councillor Maher. I assume the audits are done every year, obviously. So do we have this problem with the pension every year? If not, then why are we having it this year?
So thank you, Councillor. This is the second year that we have had a delay with the letter from the pension fund auditor. The underlying issue, I think, there is that they were newly appointed for the 2019-20 year. And in terms of the pension fund, it is an audit that's carried out alongside that of the administering authority, which is the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. And there were a large number of objections, so by members of the public, made to the accounts to RBWM in that year. And I think that has delayed the completion of the audits and has had a knock-on impact into 2021. And I'm not saying anything that isn't publicly available through their own website. So that is information that is publicly available. For 21-22, as things stand, we have been told, and Graham will confirm what they've been told as treasurers, that Deloitte are hoping to complete their audits by the end of November. However, I think that is, speaking as an auditor, a significant challenge if they're not going to complete 2021 by until sometime into September. So I suspect there will continue to be a delay. It's just that I think we are all hopeful that it will be considerably less than it has been this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a quick question about the the interim report that was issued to this previous committee. I think it was the 30th of March. I know that only ran to the end of Feb for obvious reasons because March hadn't completed at that stage. I don't propose rehashing that same detail for this new committee. I'm going to trust the abilities of the previous committee to have gone through that due diligence. But are there any substantive issues that we need to be aware of from the March period that had occurred and been uncovered since then?
So I would say no, Councillor, because all of the work aside from these two issues had been completed by the time we were reporting to the committee in March. So whilst it was the position as at more or less the end of February, it is the position as things stand now. What we will be doing within the final report is ensuring that we bring all of the reporting up to date, given that there has been a change in committee membership and given the length of time. So we will need to review it and revise it to make sure that things that we may have said and that previous committee members will be well aware of, that they are clear enough for you as a committee to understand as you will be approving the financial statements when they come before you. Is that fair, Graham? Would you agree?
I would, yeah. As you say, we've continued to work. I think there's a couple of smaller outstanding tidying up elements that were detailed, if I remember, something like page 6. And I think they've been now clarified through between the teams with no further adjustment as we expected. So, yeah, there'll be a further update as was requested once we finish the final work. But in essence, nothing different has been found.
That's great. And just to note, given we're expecting the information in September, and I note the next meeting is on the 28th of September, is it worth keeping that under review and moving that meeting so we can fully consider that then?
Yeah, definitely. Councillor Kaiser, did you have a?
Thank you very much, Chair. Can I just ask you a question? I mean, I do have a bit of insider track on the pensions. Last year we had to up our contributions to it. Now, what's going on at the moment with regards, no doubt, their revaluing of their assets and also some of the stuff that they're doing to unwind some of the investments that they've had, which may not have been considered to be in line with the normal, what people are looking for with investments with regards to the climate issue. Is it possible that we're going to see another demand on the council for additional funds to fill the gap for 22?
Chairman, can I take that, Chairman?
Please do, yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, John. There are all sorts of dynamics around the fund in terms of positive movements and negative movements, and sometimes some very small, say, changes in discounts factors can have quite a profound impact. And some of this is quite subjective in terms of who the actuary is at the particular time. So across Berkshire, so the Berkshire Treasurers mainly, we work with the pension fund and we take a consistent and long-term view to recovery, and that's substantially informed by those triennial reports. So the last one, from memory, we agreed to factor in something like 1.25% or of that ilk in each of the 3 years of the MTFP, and we all took a similar, or if not the same, approach. And therefore, these additional provisions required to get us back on an even keel over a long term, so a very long-term views taken, were already provided for when we set our medium-term financial plan and presented it to council in February this year. So the answer is yes, but it won't give us an unexpected surprise. Sorry.
Thanks, Graham. Any other comments? Councillor G.
Yeah, I've just got a quick question for Helen. I'm not quite understanding why we can't start the 2022 audit, because the 2021 one hasn't finished, because most of the figures are there and it seems to be you could do some substantive work. I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but I can't see why it can't get going unless it's a work capacity thing for EY.
It's a combination of two things, really, Councillor G. Largely, it is work capacity and our resource capacity. So we had thought we had a timetable and a plan, and then the lead senior for the audit has resigned. So that's back to the drawing board. So that's one side of it. The other side, which is linked to that, what we found has really helped for delivering 2021 compared with, for example, 1920, is having a very clear timetable and focus on what is going to be done and when. And if we start early, and yes, you are right, we could do some substantive testing, but if we don't get the flow of our work right, it usually ends up by creating more work, both for us and, more importantly, I guess from your side, your finance team. And so we will be looking to start it as soon as we can, but I want to make sure we are doing it under the right conditions. But it is largely resourcing that's driving it, but there is also an element of making sure we have the right timetable and flow of work.
Thank you.
Any other comments from members? Okay, I just had one quick one. So it is very frustrating that the accounts, haven't been signed so long after the year end. But can I just check? I mean, the draft accounts are published, and there's no sort of legislative deadline that we're at risk of breaching, is there? Is that correct?
No, there's no legislative. legislative requirement is that you have published the most recent set of statements, either audited or unaudited, with, if they are unaudited, a statement as to why they have not yet been completed. For context, there are probably still about a third of all authorities that have not yet had their audits completed. I think the last time I had an update. I might be slightly out on that.
Okay, thank you very much. If there are no other comments, I'll just say thank you to Ernst & Young for that update, and we look forward to another update at the next meeting. Okay, moving on. So the next item on the agenda is the risk management policy and guidance. Who's going to be introducing that? Is that Graham?
I believe it will be Catherine, are you, or is it Paul?
No, it's me, Graham.
Sorry, Paul will be. Obviously, this is just high level. Obviously, this is an important piece of governance infrastructure, and as part of that, we refresh it periodically to bring it to you for your review with suggestions of how it can be improved. And it's very particularly pertinent given the substantive item that I'm here for, which is the corporate risk register, because it sets out how we go about looking at reviewing and scoring and reporting on the most significant risks that the council face. So I'll hand over to Paul for further introduction.
Hi, so essentially this is, as Graham said, a periodic review of our policy and guidance. So it's every 2 years it comes to the committee for review. Essentially, I'll just talk you through the purpose of the policy. Defines the council's approach to the management of risk, and basically the format includes the key principles of managing risk and defining the roles and responsibilities of the various officers and member groups involved in risk management. So in terms of the process of the review, we have a risk management group made up of assistant directors in the council, and we went through and reviewed it, and we engaged our insurers, Gallagher Bassett, and they did a high-level review and provided some feedback to us.
So, sorry, Paul, do you know your camera's not on? Just.
Oh, it should be.
Oh, sorry, it's not on for me.
Let me just. On there.
That's it.
There we go. Thank you, Graham. Where was it? Oh, so essentially, in terms of the policy, the significant change is to recognise the work of the council's risk management group, which was created about 12 months ago, and that's it says in the policy that it's to meet quarterly, but we've actually been utilising the risk management group a bit more frequently than that to help progress the risk management agenda. The second piece is the guidance, which effectively looks to operationalise that policy. So that's probably more detail than the committee would necessarily need to see. But I think, as Graham said, because risk management is such a core element of governance, we've shared it with you so you can understand essentially how we produce the corporate risk register. And there's three changes that three significant changes that we've made to the policy. One is about tightening out the risk description and how we express risks. The second one is more sophisticated approach to how we describe the risk appetite, so that we now include impact and likelihood in terms of where we want the risk the target level of risk to be. And the third and final change is for those of you that remember the previous risk register, we've introduced a new format, which is hopefully greater clarity and a greater focus on those mitigating actions. So we've reflected that in the policy update. So that's all I wanted to say briefly about the policy and guidance piece. The second element of the consultation, the report, is asking the committee about risk management training. So as part of our review of risk management, we're looking at the risk management provision, training provision across the council. And so we're obviously, as one of the key committees of the council with a particular interest in risk management, we'd be interested on hearing your views on risk the risk management training that you would appreciate. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you for that, Paul. Okay, so if we can take it in two parts then. First of all, we need to look at the policy itself and the detail of that, and then we'll go on to talk about the training. So the policy, any members have comments or questions on that? Councillor Kaiser, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, can I just say, I think the council's made some great progress over the last 4 or 5 years with regards to working in silos. And having read this, the only thing that jumps out at me is you're removing something which is to share, exchange relevant information with colleagues in other service areas. I think that's a mistake, personally. I think that needs to remain in the document, because if you don't, what happens is you end up with one part of the council doing something, not knowing what the other part of the council is doing. And there's a lot of stuff in this council that actually does interlink now.
Sorry, which page is that, Councillor Kaiser?
31.
Would you like to respond to that, Paul?
So, sorry, Councillor Kaiser, is the stuff in red and underlined?
It's lined through basically.
Yeah.
So
no, that's the new. That's the way the track changes have come across on the document.
okay.
That's new. That's what we've added in.
Right. So you are editing. Okay, that's confusing actually. That's fine.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, I'm glad that that's. And just one other point, which.
Sorry, I think actually Councillor Kaiser's right. That's actually crossed through. It's got a strike through rather than underline.
Yeah, it's actually, yes, it is crossed through, not underlined.
It's not underlined. It's the top of page 31, and it's definitely got a strike through.
Does it appear somewhere else, maybe?
Yes, that's covered by the risk management group. So the role of the risk management group is to do that. I see how it's come across now. Yeah, sorry. So that essentially what we've done is delegated the role of CLT in that place into the risk management group itself. So they're sharing the information between. So we're trying to break the silos down at an AD level rather than rely on CLT to do that work.
Okay, that's not clear though.
Okay.
Yeah, but you need, that needs to go in here somewhere.
Yeah. So should we propose then that under the risk management group 5.13, another bullet is added to basically replicate the sharing and exchanging of information, just to make it crystal clear that we're not removing that, and it's very clear what that group is doing. Are we all happy with that? Yeah.
Can I just one other quick, sorry, just so get me out of the way. The other thing is you talk about reviewing it annually, and it now says regularly by the Audit Committee. If you say regularly, I'm not quite sure what you mean by regularly. Is it once every 5 years or once every 2 years or less than? I mean, I'd like to see at least once every 6 months. That's what I think is reasonable. I think quarterly is too arduous and it would just scum up the works, but I think once every 6 months is no bad thing. Rather than just say regularly.
I think that I would agree with that. Do other members agree with that? I mean, obviously we can look at it more often, but if we've got that in there, then at least it means we have to do that. Yeah.
.3 in the enterprise risk management section.
Okay, Paul, did you want to come back on that? Or you
sorry, I didn't catch the comment. I got.
So it was for the Audit Committee to review every 6 months at least.
Okay.
Rather than regularly.
Okay. I don't think the policy and guidance will change very much at all in that time, but the committee is welcome to view it.
It may not, but you've said regularly. I'd like to see you're moving away from at least annually. So I would like to either see it improved or left at annually. Just to say regularly is really, really woolly, because your regular might not be my regular.
Yes, so if I could just come back on that. So it was every 2 years that we look at it. Is that right, generally speaking? So
yeah,
and perhaps actually 6 months is perhaps too much. So if we agree on putting back the annually comment?
Yeah,
Is that-
I'd be happy with that. I just don't want regularly in there. I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
think-
yeah.
Okay.
At least annually. Yeah, are we happy with
Yeah.
at least annually?
No, that's fine. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, all right, thank you for that.
Sorry.
Councillor G?
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. John, were you thinking about the risk register annually, or were you thinking
I'm
about?
talking about the
You actually did read
updating
guidance.
of the. it
Oh, that's
actually
fine. Yeah.
Speaks
Okay.
about
Yeah.
the updating.
No, I would agree.
Reviewed by the committee.
Yeah. Oh, I've got quite a few minor things, but so interrupt me when you get fed up. So just starting, so I'll refer to the page number and the paragraph number. So page 24, 1.2. So it says the importance of this policy to the council will increase given that the council is becoming less risk averse. I'm just wondering whether with a change of administration, we need to raise this with the executive to make sure that they're still in agreement with that.
The policy, Councillor, if I may, the policy will go on to the executive for approval following your recommendation tonight.
Yeah, I'm not objecting, I think, to the current wording. I just think that it's important to raise this with the executive to make sure that they still have these same aspirations. You see what I mean? So that's just a comment. So I think we possibly refer that to the new exec. 1.5, I'm just wondering whether the consultation on minimum revenue provision, and I'm going to mention this later when we get to the risk register, whether that is going to affect our commercialisation strategy, possibly not for here, but maybe for later. And then, yes, and then my final one, and I can always go back, is under 2.5. I don't like that word should in terms of all other staff and elected members should be aware of it. I don't mind it for all other staff, but elected members, do we know that they're aware of this policy and guidance? Should we find out that?
Right, can I suggest that once this has been through exec, that it's then circulated to all members?
Yeah.
And that perhaps that flagged that it says in the policy that you should be aware of this, so make sure you are.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Maher.
Thank you. This is page 31, the staff element of responsibility to identify risks themselves. Will staff be given any kind of training to be able to do that themselves, to identify the difference between a risk and an issue, the different types of risk? And I see you've got kind of the grid, KPI grid, and maybe even how they fill that in. Do you do any sort of process confirmation on this?
Yeah, we're working on proposals for a training package, so that will be worked through with officers and members as appropriate, which is the second part of it. And yeah, there will be some practical support for officers in how to complete the various documentation that supports the risk management policy.
Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, in terms of, I'm just trying to be, in terms of this being active, in terms of the day-to-day work, do you have regular kind of what they call mission control kind of meetings to where in a department KPIs are reviewed in terms of output and delivery or confirmation of any process and stuff, and therefore the training element to identify risks and therefore new risks, etc., are brought up at that point, or how are they brought up and escalated?
Okay, so we operate the risk management group, which is chaired by Andrew Moulton, has representatives from each of the directorates, and they sit on their directorate leadership teams where they have risk discussions, well, as part of their business as usual activity, and then they bring those risks to the risk management group, and that's how they're escalated and put onto the corporate risk register.
Could I? Sorry.
Can I just add to that before you go, if you don't mind? What I'm trying to get at is identifying risk at a lower level and how that escalates up into the directorate, up the directorate, rather than from the direct. I see the structure from the kind of assistant directors upwards. It seems okay, but what I'm more interested in is really at the ground level, more operational level, working its way up. That was the question.
Okay, can I help? Yeah, I think there's many facets to this, and I understand what you're talking about is how risks are identified, say at the coalface, let's say as an expression. In different departments, there will be different mechanisms for doing that. So imagine in children's services, that will be through the case reviews. In adults, the same. In place and growth, it will be the inspection regime that will feed a lot of that. And so there's different ways, let's say practices, reports, etc. But they ultimately, those issues should feed up through the management chain, and then they will land up at departmental discussions so that the departments will create a departmental risk register and will look to mitigate those as best they can. And where they see that they can't address all the issues of such significance or such magnitude, then that gets escalated to CLT at the most senior level of risk. So I understand you're talking from the very bottom. From the very bottom, it will be a whole network of different ways that risks are understood and escalated. But ultimately, it's the director through the departmental risk register to have a clear understanding of those. And the director provides a management assurance statement to say, these are the mechanisms we've got in place. These are the issues that we've had. These are how we've addressed them. And these are the things that we need to escalate through our management assurance statement. So effectively, that statement is the captain on the ship saying, I've surveyed all around and all is clear, or there's a problem ahead, that type of thing, for us to then include in an overall wide council assurance statement.
Thank you.
The answer is yes, but it's very complex and there's lots of facets to it.
Thank you, Graham. Any other comments from members? Councillor Davis?
Yeah, so I can say generally a very good document. This is what I do a lot of my time, and it's one of the better ones than I expected, certainly from the government. I've not first principled it. I'm just looking at high level comments. I won't be the pedantic picky bits, but I did note in section 5.7 you haven't corrected third tier manager to be assistant director. It's a minor change, but that's then being changed everywhere else, so it makes sense to be changed there. I noted about regularly being ambiguous, and if you forgive me while I scroll through, because I haven't worked out the button to press to get to next comment in Edge yet. Yeah, here we go. So there's a couple of instances, I think, when you reference the number of people living in the ward and then some of the particular systems, in a good example, section 9.4 around health and safety. In my experience, referring to specific system names is just something you're going to need to update in the future. Perhaps refer to taking out references to how many people live here and the particular systems that we use saves on updates. So they're going to review it once a year. I'm sure that'll be absolutely fine. And that was on page, thank you very much, yes, 42. And I had one more comment, and I promise this one's more relevant. Yeah, stage 4 of your control processes. Absolutely agree that there may be no need to mitigate the risk. There was no explicit mention that they would be recorded and the individual who had taken that decision would be recorded. I think it's important for the governance process. I'm sure that is the case, but given everything else is so very complete, it would be a shame to have a gap there. If I've missed that recording somewhere else, I apologise, and I'm happy that that's okay. So that's section, stage 4 of section, yeah, page 47 for those in the room.
Yeah.
But no, very good document.
Okay. Thank you. I think you're correct. There probably is an oversight around specifying that we record who takes that decision. It does happen. It's just should be a policy. So.
I assumed it would. It's just everything else is written down in a good detailed document. You risk something if you don't write down that one little bit of detail. Anyway, thank you very much.
Any other comments? Councillor G.
Yeah, I noticed that as I was going through that you deleted business, which I think is a good thing because we are a council, not a business, but I think it might need a bit more search and replace for that. And where it says organisation, you put in council, which I think is also good because it personalises the document. So again, a little bit of search and replace. I mean, obviously not business as usual, but there were some places where it could have gone. Under 5.0 on page 27, I don't like, I think, sentences that start with where possible. So could you just start with ERM shall be integrated within existing corporate processes? Would there be a situation where it wouldn't?
Paul, have you got a comment on that?
No, that's a fair comment.
Okay, and I'm just going down. Yes, members again. So 5.11, it says, which is on page 30, to have the knowledge and skills requisite to their role with regard to management and to undertake awareness training in respect of ERM as and when specified training needs are identified. So how do we identify training needs for members and how do we deliver it? So again, it's this idea of finding out members should be informed. How do we find out they've got a training need? Should we just assume that everybody does? It'd probably be easier, to be fair. So I'd like to see some programme that shows how you're identifying it appropriate to their role, I think. And now I'm on to the guidance, sorry. I don't think I've actually got very much to say about the guidance. It was fine. Oh, I know, there was something about eliminating risk through, where was it? Let me go through. So just scrolling through, there was a bit about minimising risk by transferring risk. Here we go. So on page 48, it says that transferring to another body or organisation, i.e. insurance, don't have a problem with that, contractual arrangements, outsourcing and partnerships. If we have a look at the corporate risk register later, we will see that we seem to be re-importing, i.e. insourcing or deleting partnerships. And one of the things is about getting more control. Lack of control is a risk. And I'm not sure that this is the best example, really, because it leads one to think that actually outsourcing and partnerships and contractual arrangements are without risk. So you can transfer risk to them. Often, if you transfer risk, you end up paying a higher price. And sometimes transferring one sort of risk results in another sort of risk, as we've seen with the Public Protection Partnership and various things with Optalis in the past. I think I have a particular problem with thinking that we can outsource our risk without it having consequences itself.
Okay, before I bring Paul in on that, can I just check, what would you propose to change? I mean, because transferring risk is, fairly sort of, standard way of describing what, these kind of things. But is it just the outsourcing and the partnerships bit that you would remove, or what would you propose as a change?
I think I would like it to be acknowledged that we shouldn't transfer one sort of risk while effectively acquiring a different sort of risk. Given what's come up in the risk register, it says just below that, it says relatively few risks have to be transferred or terminated. But actually, we've attempted to transfer quite a few risks, and now we're re-importing them. And I think that's my problem with that description of how to be transferred. I don't think it always does transfer the risk.
Paul, have you got any comments?
I would suggest that it should be I think we should look at it as an option that we should be considering. I agree completely with Councillor G's point about you can transfer some element of risk to other organisations, but you will always hold an element of risk around that as the I guess the authority that is accountable to the public for that. So if you're in an outsourcing or partnership arrangement, we are rightfully the accountable body. So we must understand that we can't transfer all the risk, much as the way is in insurance. You can transfer the financial element of the risk, but you don't necessarily transfer the reputational element of the risk. Graham wants to come in.
Well, I was just going to add, maybe it would be something about with knowledgeable transfer of risk or appropriate transfer of risk, because of course there's loads of examples where you can transfer the financial risk, albeit you pay a bit more throughout the course of the contract. But obviously if something significantly untoward happened, then they bear the risk. And obviously that's similar with insurance. So I think it's about transferring the risk and understanding the consequences, I suppose, whilst understanding consequences. I think hopefully captures the point. But of course, yes, we will, of course, where we can legitimately transfer risk. What I do note is obvious, of course, we don't transfer the risk of delivery. So if there's service failure and it's outsourced, then of course the resident just sees that's the council's failure, and understandably so. Obviously, the same with schools and academies. So yeah, I accept the point, but I think there's a legitimate transfer consideration to be made.
Thank you, Graham. That's exactly what I was thinking of, is that you don't transfer the delivery eventually. Thank you.
Councillor Kaiser?
Would not better wording be the council may take the opportunity to share some risks with outside suppliers and contractors rather than transfer risks? It does sound like an abdication of our responsibility.
Other members' comments on that? I mean, transfer is sort of traditionally used in this way, isn't it? But sorry, Councillor Smith and Councillor Davis.
I think there's a case for both, because it may be perfectly legitimate to transfer a risk that you can package successfully to a company or another body. But there is also the requirement, as Councillor Kaiser suggests, of shared risk. So I think we ought to add in shared risk, not just swap it for transfer.
Councillor Davis?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, these are standard terms used in enterprise risk management. So whilst the description that goes beneath to kind of elucidate, but I do agree, sharing the risk is another way of analysing that, and is a nuance not considered in here. I will be happy to leave as it is for the sake of not changing a document that stood for time and being understood in that way. But equally, I'm happy to add that for clarification if John wishes.
Could I propose that we change the wording just slightly so it says transferred to transfer or share to another body or organisation? So we've got both then, yeah? Okay.
It's read better for the council.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from members before we talk about the training side of things? Councillor G?
I think that just shows that I need some training on this, because it's I'm just reading it as a layperson.
Okay, thank you. So on the training side, I guess there are a number of different options, aren't there? I don't know what's available to us in terms of what the council already signed up to for staff. I guess we can look at an exercise where we identify each of our, existing training and knowledge on risk, and then move to commission some training, or we can just sort of assume that none of it. I mean, I know this committee has not had risk management training in the last few years, so many of us will have had risk training and experience, but I mean, I certainly haven't had any specific to the council setting in recent years. So do other members have any comments before we perhaps ask officers what they might recommend as well? Councillor Smith?
I think it would be wise to assume that we all need some sort of training, because we all come from different backgrounds. And it's all very well saying this committee has had training in the past, but there's been a significant change of personnel. So I was quite surprised having become a member of the Audit Committee, that there was to be no training. So I'm going to learn on the job, which I don't think is a very effective way of doing it. It's been training for planning, it's been training for a variety of other areas. So I think this is an area that needs it, and it needs to be done perhaps at base level and then at higher levels as the requirement increases.
Councillor Davies?
Thank you, Councillor Rich. I think there are two bits that are worth training on. One is the best practice in ERM generally, because there is a lot in here that follows that. And also it would be helpful to have a kind of a run through the key customer journeys you've got within here, the use cases that describe how we go through the process is a good example. How do we track the risks at the low level? I think was answered very well here. So, fundamental, conceptually what it is, and then bring the council's way of working to life. How will we deliver that as well? Just because this is so important, I think the Audit Committee are the ones who need to really understand this, but the full council need to have this at the front of their mind when they're making decisions, because everything we do carries risk to one degree or another. If it could be recorded, because I know if you try and do it one-off, you'll get 20% of the people turning up, whatever, who is available that if it's recorded and can be replayed, and then we evangelise people to actually go and watch that. I don't know whether we have that capability within WBC. I hope we do. If we do, we should use it.
Okay, any other comments from members? Councillor G?
Yeah, I did clarify with Andrew Moulton, there is supposed to be training for the Audit Committee, which I would be very happy to go on again, but I can't find out where it is. So if we can find out where it is, and new members definitely need to access it, and I would appreciate a refresh as well.
Conversely, when I asked about training, I was told categorically there was none. Oh. Despite it being in the schedule issued to new councillors as to the various different elements of training that were going to be had on different subjects like planning, etc. So I was a bit surprised.
Okay, thank you. Could I throw that back to the officers? So there's two elements to it. There's Audit Committee training as a general training, and then what options are open to us in terms of risk management training, and particularly for the Audit Committee, but also that could be opened out to all members as well. Paul, are you able to comment on that, or which officer?
I can talk about the risk management training. I can talk historically about Audit Committee training that happened, how it used to work when I worked in internal audit many years ago. So I'll start with the risk management training. Yeah, essentially, I can definitely look at organising some training around ERM best practice, and then incorporate customer journeys into that. I think looking at your forward plan for September, doing it before the committee wouldn't really give us enough time to do that. So I can work with yourself, Councillor Burgess, on working out what the best way of delivering that was, the risk management training was to the committee in future. Look to arrange a training session for you.
Thank you. Are members happy for me to just liaise with? Yep, that's great. And then I don't know if anyone else can comment on the Audit Committee training, whether that is the standard Audit Committee training we should have undertaken. Don't know if Democratic Services know.
We can check, go back to Andrew when he's back and check what exactly was promised and what was delivered, which sounds like nothing.
Okay, thank you. Right, so any other comments before we go look at the recommendations? Okay, so in terms of the recommendations, so are we all happy, subject to the changes, which I will recap, are we all happy to approve these subject to the risk management group, just adding a bullet point into there to make sure that it's clear that it's encouraging sharing across areas, making sure that we review it at least annually, changing the nomenclature in section 5.7, recording the individual, as Councillor Davis pointed out in stage 4, 5.1, removing where possible, and adding that change about transfer or share. Are we all happy, subject to those changes, to approve that policy as is? Okay, thank you. Can I also add an additional recommendation that once it has been once it's been agreed, that it's circulated to all members? Okay, can I just see a show of hands? Is everyone happy with those recommendations? Okay, thank you very much. And I will liaise with the officers regarding the training. Okay, thank you. So the next item is our actual risk register. Who is going to be introducing this? Is that you, Paul?
No, it's Graham.
Graham, okay, thank you.
Sorry, my button's stuck at the wrong time. Yes, thank you. Just some words by way of introduction. This corporate risk register is received at, I think, quarterly, so at most of the scheduled meetings. And usually, if we can, we have a member of the council's corporate leadership team present this. Obviously, whoever's presenting is not going to be expert at all areas, but will have an appreciation, or should have an appreciation of all areas. So I'm happy to take questions on all. The most significant issues in the paper to note will be the new risks identified in 2.1, which will include inward migration, public transport, and then Appendix A is it pictorially shows, and if you look towards the top right hand corner, and for those who aren't familiar with this graph and process, the graph is it's a simple matrix of likelihood and impact. So if you're top right, the likelihood is high and the impact is high, and vice versa for the bottom left. So top right is shaded red. They're the things of most concern that the corporate leadership are bringing to your attention. That doesn't mean we're not doing anything about it. It just means, as good governance, we're alerting the Audit Committee through this report. So the council's overall financial position, to be honest, I think almost every local authority in the country would have their financial position in the top right, certainly those that undertake unitary functions. And SEND is special education needs and development. Again, we would not be alone in having that towards the top right. And also, certainly in the south of England, any authority that runs adult social care would have the health and social care reform and the impact on the adult social care market in towards the top right. So just so people know, by way of process, this is part of the overall framework that we were discussing previously, and the director working with Andrew Morton, the governance team, we will escalate to corporate leadership team, and then corporate leadership team will discuss the relative magnitude, significance, and how risk can be managed, mitigated, etc., and what's emerging and what's falling away in terms of importance. And so this is effectively a report from your council's corporate leadership team that has all of the directors and statutory officers around that table.
Thank you, Graham. So I'll open it out to members, just to remind members that we're here to sort of provide, to seek assurance that the risks are being managed properly. So there's quite a lot of detail in here. So if we could sort of keep that in mind as we have the discussion. So anyone got any questions or comments on the risk register? Okay, Councillor G.
Yes, so just going back to a favourite topic of mine, minimum revenue provision. So I know that there's been some clarity now about capital loans and the use of capital receipts, but there's still continuing uncertainty over minimum revenue provision, I think, perhaps you can clarify, Graham, about whether it has to be provided on existing CFR or on any new loans taken out. So I'm wondering whether that should be in the risk register until such time as the latest consultation, which I think ends on the 1st of July, ends.
Yeah, okay. Minimum revenue provision, I I haven't identified specifically as a risk on its own, but I would include it in that overall budget and financial resilience, and therefore I would point the committee to the Council's Chief Finance Officer's report that identifies a whole host of risks and issues that the Council needs to be aware of that could go against us and we need to prepare for. So I wouldn't say it's excluded altogether. I would include it. I would take that top right hand corner budget risk is please see the Council's Chief Finance Officer report, and that includes the MRP issue. Moving to the MRP issue, there is no determination yet as to how the MRP is applied, and we have a consultation, you're absolutely right, Councillor G, that I have been invited as a previous say representative of putting forward issues impacting local authorities if it's enacted in a particular way. So all those that put themselves forward before, been invited to come back again, and we will be making our representations. The only thing that does seem to be clear following the revised iteration is there seems to be an acceptance of loans to housing companies or maybe other companies, but loans to council-owned companies, that to charge MRP is like a double charge because they have to provide depreciation and MRP, and that seems to be recognised because it makes the case unviable. As to what it really means for us, it's really hard to judge. Obviously, that's good news that they've taken that view around housing. I would be surprised if there was an exception for commercial properties, because actually the reason why they brought this in is to force a debt repayment for commercial acquisitions. But of course we need to, I can't answer your question about the CFR. Do they create a new CFR and say it's now from this date, or is there a retrospective application to it? So yes, it's a risk. Yes, it is included, but within the overall gambit of the financial risks facing the council. And of course, it's something I'll need to will keep this committee appraised of.
If I just go back to Councillor G and then I'll take Councillor Kaiser.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, and you'll have to forgive me if I don't understand quite how all this works with the annual accounts. But if we had to provide CFR on things that we currently haven't provided it on, would that have any impact on the going concern opinion in the accounts? So is this in any way an adjusting post-balance sheet event? And I know that the auditors don't audit the budget, but just thinking ahead, if our reserves drop to zero, then that would affect the opinion on the accounts. So I'm just wondering what your opinion is on if MRP does have to be provided on things we haven't provided on, what the overall impact will be on our reserves and on our annual report and accounts, even from 2021, which is still outstanding.
Okay, it was one thing that was clear even from the initial consultation is that it was not a retrospective requirement. It was only required from April 23, and therefore up until that time there is no requirement to do it. And when I say I appreciate the CFR is a cumulative balance, but it's not about adjusting all the transactions that should have gone on previously and putting those in. It's about now using a different figure to do your calculation for 23, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26. Obviously, Helen can correct me, of course, and she will if I say this wrong. But in terms of the current rules, and we can only work by the current rules, our MRP provision is actually is fine and actually on the right side of fine. So if anything, we're over providing under the current rules. And they're the only rules that exist at the moment. And the April 23 requirement therefore will apply to accounts 23, 24, 24, 25, etc. What I will say is this council doesn't just depend on its general fund reserves. And so, for example, you would have seen many of you are new to this, but when you get to see them, and those that were here previously, in our statement of accounts, we list all of our reserves, and those reserves are quite significant, and they provide, say, risk guard to the likes of the town centre regeneration, to the strategic development locations. So and of course, if they're not used, they can repay the debt. So I think it isn't it doesn't threaten the council because it doesn't exist at the moment. But of course, when let's assume it does come in, then from April 23, then we'll obviously have to review our earmark reserve provision and what can be released to repay debt. But I do not believe, and of course we may have to change tack in terms of seeking capital receipts or changing, ways that we're doing things in terms of objectives, for example, on the capital programme. But I don't believe it will, let's say, turn this council into an unsustainable financial position. We will find a way out of it either through our risks, our earmark reserves, or through changes in our objectives and capital aspirations.
Okay, can I bring in Councillor Kaiser now? Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Just one question, which is, you spoke about commercial and housing. I think it's understood. What about loans for forward funding of infrastructure? What impact will MRP have on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that was one of the issues that I raised. What the government have said all the way through this is we do not want to create unintended consequences. The intention, although it may feel like a bit of a sledgehammer to crack a nut, is to curb commercial investments, or at least we'll curb them in many ways, but another way is to make sure that it's been fully repaid, the debt's fully repaid. They are concerned about unintended consequences, as I said, and that will be a key part. Once I've properly worked through with our Treasury Management advisors what we think this later iteration means, but one of the key things I'll be forcing home to them is a strategic development location should be treated as a work in progress as we build the roads, build the schools, etc. And then we receive the seal or the 106, and that should be ring fenced as a work in progress. And if you treat it any other way, you will prevent this council undertaking a vital part of regeneration and development, and it will mean we won't be able to provide upfront funding in the way that we have, which has allowed us to have really good high quality infrastructure. But by not doing that, it means that we will lose quality, and actually we will maybe lose the ability to unlock for development as well. So if the government are true to their word, they don't want unintended consequences, they will allow that to be ring fenced. Sorry, we're getting a bit technical here, but by allowing it to be ring fenced, it means the year after completion, MRP applies. So currently you can have an MRP holiday if the scheme is work in progress. Obviously, with big schemes, it's important to be clear what is the work in progress, the scope of the work in progress. Sorry, that was long-winded, but it's quite complicated.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Smith?
Yes, I've been looking through these and they are a snapshot in time. I was just wondering whether or not there's any opportunity to try to indicate how things are either have changed in time or are anticipated in changing going forwards, because almost all of them are the current situation is worse than the target. None of there's 3 or 4, I think, that are on target. There's none where the risk is lower than target. I was just wondering how things are changing in time. That might be a bit difficult.
Okay. No, I understand the point. Just to let you know, if something's falls below the risk appetite, as in the risk is lower than risk appetite, they tend to fall off the corporate risk register so that we keep a focus on the most important areas of concern. So you're right, you won't see many, if any, where we consider the risk to be lower than the risk appetite. We'll say that risk is not of a status to be escalated. We used to, and forgive me, I can't recall if it's in this report, but we used to talk about changes from the last quarter in terms of if there's been any changes in terms of scoring, and we can make sure that's clearer if that's not there. But what we have done is, and we continue to do so, is identify new risks. So in 2.1, we've identified where 3 risks where they weren't there before, and now they are. So we have gone some way to indicate that direction of travel, but maybe that's something we can maybe quite easily address in terms of an arrow up, down, or to the side in terms of movement from last quarter.
Thank you.
Councillor Maher.
Thank you. I just wanted to talk about risk 5, the inability to meet on the growing demands of children with SEND. I didn't quite understand the existing controls in terms of are they going to see us out of this situation? I mean, I haven't read the SEND strategy, but you got a SEND improvement board, and you got the weekly performance tracker, and you're trying to improve your relationship. But is there a way out of this issue? I don't really see that here in any kind of a mitigation.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Again, really important question and a good one. The answer is in there in terms of mitigation. There is currently loads of work describing what we can currently do. And although we can do quite a lot, significant change requires significant capital investment, because one of the biggest things we can do is build 3 SEND schools, for example, and fill them with Wokingham children. But that's not cheap, and we can't find the land straight away, the money straight away, and of course even the SEND school that we were bringing in through the DFE that we're putting in, that postponed and stalled at least a year. So that was frustrating as well. Ultimately, SEND, like some of those other things on the risk register, is a risk and pressure that's felt across all of the country. Just to give you an example, so SEND it has a financial impact on the dedicated schools grant. The dedicated schools grant deficit is in excess of £10 million, which sounds eye-watering, but it's not even the second highest in Berkshire. So there's 2 others in Berkshire that have higher. Then you can imagine what that deficit is in Hampshire, in Surrey, etc. They go into 10 times plus what ours is. So it is a national issue, and it's an indication of a national system that's broken. And what's broken in it is we have all these statutory pressures, and we have limited ability to be able to deal with it. So even if we could magically build all of these schools and find the money, it wouldn't necessarily take the problem away, because the way that the money flows from the government around dedicated schools grant, the schools forum, how it can be allocated, and the rules and regulations about how it's used, what you can use it on, etc., and the amount of money coupled with the statutory requirement to respond to the SEND, those that qualify under the SEND system, creates a mismatch between resources and ability to address. We are potentially and hoping to be part of what's called the safety valve mechanism, and I think it's a really good thing, is that authorities that of a sufficient deficit and have also been making strong representations to the government need to have, we've got ourselves onto an invitation to be able to put our case forward to be part of a safety valve community. And this will involve additional assistance, financial assistance, flexibilities, etc. But we will only get on there once we justify or can demonstrate we are professional and serious and committed enough and have tried as many things as we can ourselves. So they wouldn't want to put good money after bad. They would want confidence that we're a council that knows what we're doing and are taking it seriously and doing all things reasonable. It's obviously a massive consideration for Helen Watson and her team, and I talked to Helen about this and indeed the chief executive. And I think one of the biggest issues for us, in addition to self-sufficiency and provision of SEND places, is to get onto this scheme, because I think this is the only real way out of what seems to be a Gordian knot.
So thank you. Sounds dreadful, to be honest. Just as a general question, more than anything else, you've got 4 which are quite highly rated. So for risks, how long, in terms of time, if they're still there after a period of time, would you start to get really worried about them in terms of saying, well, this is not moving? I mean, this is the risk number 5, this one, for example, with the SEND children, it's not going to be resolved anytime soon. And there are other 3. So in terms of action or trying to minimize those or something in those to try to move them, what sort of time periods do you have in mind in terms of saying, well, actually, we've now got a very serious problem here, even though they're already serious anyway, but we need to move on this one way or the other?
Oh, crikey. I suppose giving examples and taking each in turn, because I think the answers to give your very good question justice, I just need to say run through specifics. So say budget and financial resilience. We're undertaking work all the time. So that's never off the radar. We're currently looking at ways that we can put forward to create a financially viable system. We're also looking to strengthen our financial management systems, improve our finance support resource, improve our system, all sorts of things. So, and we can do all we like and do amazing well, and then we get a local government finance settlement that takes a big lump of our money away, or something else happens, and we have to keep going. So it's like it's painting the Forth Bridge in many ways. You just keep going, and the only thing is whether it changes its position on the grid through how we feel at any particular time. But I would say I can't remember when I wouldn't have put it towards the top right. So the work goes on and big things get delivered, but it doesn't necessarily take away the risk. It means you're doing all you can to wade through or survive, let's say. The SEND one, again, it's not that loads of great things aren't being done, and of course, if we're built, a key milestone is the SEND school. Maybe get another one, getting on the safety valve. They're key milestones, but it won't take the problem away. The deficit, even if we do all the things in our plan, the deficit will still increase. It will just increase at a slower rate. So the only real change is in some ways outside of our control, but that's the same with local authorities across the country, particularly in the south. But I suppose, well, I would say we're already there with SEND. It's over £10 million deficit. It scares the life out of me, but there is no solution. And others in my shoes feel the same. So it's already too big, that deficit. And all we can do is keep making representations. And I think that safety valve, being in that community, is really important and gives me more hope than I've had for some time in that area. As for the adult health and social care reform, that will be much more timelined. So there will come a date in October 23, and we will need to be ready, as ready as we can be, and we will start to know the costs, and we will need to fund those costs or have plans to fund the costs. So that's a long-winded way of saying some will always be there. It's almost no matter what they do, they will always be there. Others will have key milestones, and others will have absolute definitives that 3 years from now we will know exactly what we need to do to cope with the adult social care NHS reforms, how much it costs us, what our gaps in workforce response and what our waiting lists are, and all of that, and the numbers that are presenting themselves to the council.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Councillor Midge. No, I agree with SEND. It's a really knotty problem that it's so very slow to resolve, expensive to fix, but also tied up in statutory delivery requirements that just ever increasing the deficit, as you say. It would be helpful there. You mentioned about the SEND provision that's being planned and delivered. I think those sort of wins and success go a long way to demonstrate the great work that's been done by the officers to help on here. If there is a way to include that within this report so that the Audit Committee particularly can see that there is at least progress against a problem that doesn't necessarily bring the risk down, but it will reassure, and I'm sure any constituent reading this would also be reassured by that. The only one I had was unfortunately really sort of questioning one that's down as meeting its target, and that's in terms of the local plan. And this isn't intended to be a political point, I hasten to add, merely that we have now a change of administration that's recently come in, and I'm sure they would want to review the local plan at the very least, which to my mind presents a risk of it being delivered in the timelines here. Is that really an accurate reflection of where we are, as it being relatively benign?
Yeah, on your first point, you're absolutely right. The intention of this was to show actions that have been undertaken to mitigate that risk. So the fact that the Oak Tree School, as it's known, isn't referred to as an omission, because that is a important part of addressing that. So you're absolutely right, and it should be there. So we'll look to include that going forward. On the local plan, I can only say that's from the director's perspective, obviously working with the new administration, as you referenced, that was how it was recently scored. So I've got no reason to tell you otherwise.
That's very reassuring. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from members? Okay, I just had a quick couple of points from me. First, the format, I think the format works really well. It's changed quite a lot since I last looked at it in detail. I think you get a lot on each page, but it's not overcrowded. You've got the risk appetite in there. I notice you have got the increase or the decrease already on there, Graham, as well. So I think that's much improved. So I appreciate that. I just had one sort of query on risk 6, actually, statutory duties. So that risk has increased. And I didn't really understand why. So on page 57, it talks about it seems to be increasing because of the impact of COVID on management capacity to undertake proactive health and safety activity. Now, what am I missing? Because I would have thought that would be decreasing with COVID reducing, generally speaking. So would you be able to explain that one a little bit?
Yeah, sorry, did you say page 56? I'm just feverishly.
Page 57. So it says risk 6 on statutory duties to do with health and safety. I didn't understand why that one, the risk had increased on that one.
I think this is to do with, and I will confirm, but I think this is to do with capacity, as in increase in illness, and therefore present availability to undertake work. So it's the impact on business resilience in this, particularly in this area.
Okay, so we might hopefully expect that one to decrease in future.
Yes, it says this is likely to be a short to medium term increase in risk is the final sentence.
Yeah, okay, thank you for clarifying that. Any other comments before we move on? Okay, thank you very much. That's just to note that report. Okay, so the next item is internal audit. So who's going to be introducing this item, please?
Or be me, Chair.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. Item 11, which is on pages 81 to 106 in the agenda pack, presents the annual report of internal audit and investigation work for the financial year 21-22. It's been presented to ensure that the Council meets its legislative requirements and also ensures that the Audit Committee complies with its terms of reference in relation to internal audit work. This annual report is supplemented with progress reports that are presented to Audit Committee throughout the year, and the last one was presented on the 30th of March with progress to the end of February. Before I highlight some of the key points in the report, I was just going to mention that 21-22 financial year has been quite unusual. It's not been a typical year for various reasons. First of all, we've been going through a year of transition. So the shared audit and investigation partnership with the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead has been dissolved. So work has been undertaken during the year to ensure that there's been a smooth transition and handover to the new provider. And that work was completed on the 31st of March 2022. There's also been the issue of the COVID. There were some delays in the previous financial year in getting some of the audits underway as auditees were responding to the pandemic. However, during the 21-22 financial year, we've managed to bring those audits up to date, and those were mainly in the areas of key financial systems work. And then thirdly, obviously, we're looking forward to the future now. So after the dissolution of the shared service, we've been setting up our new in-house internal audit and investigation service for Wokingham and the 3 clients that it services in terms of audit work. So against this background, I think you can see from the report you're receiving tonight, there has been a good broad range of audit and investigation coverage and balance of work throughout the year. In this annual report, we give a summary of the work that we've undertaken through the year, but also the Chief Audit Executive, which is the Head of Internal Audit and Investigation at Wokingham, gives an annual opinion on the Council's internal control, risk management, and governance framework. So I can just draw your attention, first of all, to Appendix A1, which is on pages 97 to 105 in the pack. This is a list of audits that have been undertaken through the year and those that were in progress at the year end. It gives a position of those audits and the audit opinions that have been awarded where audits got to the final stage of completion. And this list of work, as well as other assurance mechanisms across the Council, is used to inform the Head of Internal Audit and Investigation annual opinion. So from that work that we've undertaken, we've given the second highest opinion on the Council's internal control, risk management and governance framework. And that says that this is substantially complete and generally effective, but with some improvements required. So as I mentioned earlier, there has been a good scope of work that we've undertaken to form that opinion. We've undertaken various reviews of the key corporate risks from the Corporate Risk Register. And in addition, we've previously reported on work we undertook to develop an annual governance toolkit to review and monitor implementation of the Council's own local code of corporate governance. And then we've brought all our key financial systems work up to date after all the delays with the COVID. I also have included in the report the work that we've undertaken on investigations, and specifically there's been quite significant work on the COVID-19 grants that have been awarded to the council. And so we've ensured that all the returns have been made to BICE as required. We've also undertaken a National Fraud Initiative data matching exercise, which is a mandatory exercise. And in the table on page 92, table 3, that sets out the results and values of that work that have been provided by the Cabinet Office. And I think you can see that's quite a worthwhile piece of work that we've undertaken there. And we've also undertaken some proactive investigation activity. So finally, as I said earlier, the focus now is going to be on our new internal audit investigation service going forward. We have set up arrangements and agreed a way forward and a structure for the new in-house service and the 3 clients that we have. And we're also taking the opportunity to review all our protocols and processes and procedures to ensure that we have the most effective internal audit and investigation service going forward. The report's coming to you this evening to just note the activity of the internal audit and investigation service, and also the progress in delivering the 21-22 annual internal audit and investigation plan. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Who's got any comments or questions? Councillor Davis, then Councillor Maher. Thank you.
Thank you. The first one is something I probably should know, but I read with interest the list of issues and the list of audits and obviously those with recommendations. I presume those are accessible on the website. I did try and find a couple in the last week, but the actual detail of the final audits I couldn't find myself. If that could be shared either as a link in the report, that would be helpful going forward. I also note you have a recruitment campaign with 2 posts. I'm unclear of how large your team is, so I don't know the materiality of 2 people. Is that 10%, 100%? You know, how big an issue is that for you?
Okay, just answering the first question, in terms of the audits, are you meaning the actual audit reports themselves with the detail? Because generally we don't publish those on the website.
Exactly that. So for example, in the corporate governance, you've got a 2, which means there's some actions to be undertaken. I would like to know what those are as a member of audit to say they are undertaken for next year.
Right, okay, so we can make those available to members you know, as part of this meeting, but we generally don't publish the whole report on the website. That's just been the way things have operated in the past.
Can I make a proposal? I know this hasn't happened in the past, but I've thought exactly the same a couple of years ago, that we don't get enough visibility of the reports themselves. Would it be possible to circulate all finalised internal audit reports to this committee by email each time, and then if we have particular lines of inquiry, we can then raise them at the next meeting? Appreciate you might not want to publish those, but I would agree that it'd be good to get more visibility of those.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I think in the past members have just wanted to know where there are things that might keep them awake at night, so the really significant issues. But happy to circulate just within the committee the actual reports themselves.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Maher?
So, sorry, just going on to the second question as well, Councillor Davis. In terms of the size of the audit team, so obviously we've gone through our restructure. So the team itself, we've got 6.5 full-time equivalent posts now in that team. That comprises myself, 4.6 senior auditors and an apprentice post. But the way we're going forward, we're trying to do things slightly differently. So we're also engaging with a framework agreement with the London Borough of Barnet, where we can procure specialist audit activities. So if it's something that's very technical and specialist, that we can use that framework to supplement the work that we do in-house. And we also will be making use of the graduate trainee programme as well. So as graduates rotate around the authority, then they may come for a period of time, say 6 months within the audit team, to enhance the skills in terms of audit. And then we've also have a guest auditor programme, whereby someone might come into the team for a short period of time and work with the audit team. So we're just trying to build that resilience and just do things slightly differently going forward, rather than just have the traditional internal audit structure, because we think there's a lot more skills that can be brought into the team to enhance what we've already got.
Just before I go to Councillor Maher, could I just ask a question related to that? Could you explain a bit more about how you ensure independence? Because obviously, you know, a lot of internal auditors are actually external audit firms, and obviously we've got an in-house, completely in-house operation now. Can you talk a bit more about how you ensure that you maintain independence as auditors?
Yes, so we have an audit charter that came to a previous audit committee. I can make that available to the new committee. That basically gives the head of internal audit and investigation direct access to the chief executive, so I can have regular one-to-one meetings on a regular basis with her, and also a direct line to the chair of the audit committee. So if I felt internal audit voice wasn't being heard, have those routes that I can go through. Obviously, we try to resolve anything before it gets to that, but we did have that built into the charter, so it's very clear that there is that independence.
Thank you. Councillor Maher.
Thank you very much. I've got a number of questions, and you've answered two of them, which is good. So that I'm glad to see that you have a degree of independency, and then you effectively can get direct access to the chief executive. So there's more kind of questions really, and I just wanted to go through those. Does the internal audit carry out any work for the external, on behalf of the external auditors, so that the external auditors at the end of the year, when they're undertaking their audit, can take that into consideration, which may help to reduce the fees that are being charged to us? And I'll go with that one. There were a lot of grants certification audits done. Was that required by the government, or did you feel that you needed to do that yourself? And then are there any regular annual audits that you carry out on a regular basis? And then I'll come back with a couple of more, if you want to just answer those first.
Right, thank you. So in terms of any work that we can undertake on behalf of external audits, several years ago we used to have what was called the managed audit approach, whereby external audit and internal audit would work together, and they'd look to place reliance on our work, which helped to reduce the audit fee to avoid any duplication. However, that managed audit has not been in place for some time now, so that hasn't it doesn't work in practice. I think Helen's got a hand up there. She might want to say a few words as well. Did you want to pop in now, Helen?
Yeah, I think just to clarify, it's not for a lack of desire of working together, but actually international auditing standards prevent us from directing the work of internal audit. Internal audit is a management mechanism for monitoring and ensuring you have a good system of internal control. So whilst we have regard to the work that Catherine and her team do, we cannot direct their work in such a way that it reduces the amount of work that we are required to do under ISAs. Hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. It just where I've worked before, we've tended to do that. But anyway, that's okay.
And then just moving on to your second question about the number of grants that we've been involved with. So in terms of the COVID-19 grants, we have to make regular returns on the work that we've done. We've undertaken post-assurance checks, and also BICE actually send out to us samples that they want us to check on their behalf. So in terms of the other grants that we've undertaken, we've only undertaken those that have required a signature by the head of internal audit and the Section 151 officer or chief executive to actually certify off the grant. So that has been a requirement that's been placed on us, otherwise we wouldn't get the grant allocated. And the third question, audits that we undertake on a regular basis. We undertake work on key financial systems. We have coverage of those every year, although we are moving towards more of a risk-based approach on those as well. So given that we've had some good coverage in 21-22, looking forward, we'll be able to just focus on those that are at greater risk to the council. And we've also got a slightly different approach this time as well. So rather than just doing traditional key financial systems work, we're linking back into the corporate risk register. And that's corporate risk 1 that you were discussing earlier about the budget and the financial resilience, is one of the items in our audit plan to undertake in this financial year. So you'll see better linkage then with the actual corporate risk register.
Just the last couple of questions, really.
Okay.
On page 97, you've got climate emergency audit, and it just said, so there isn't an audit opinion. I assume that's because it's a draft report. Okay.
No, that's right. We have the draft report. That was a piece of audit where we have used the framework agreement with Barnet Council. So we use specialists with PwC who've got expertise in the area of climate emergency. And we're just discussing with the director, assistant director, the action plan that's come out of that piece of work. So that should be finalised next time we report to the audit committee.
Thank you. Sorry, the last question is 5.1, where it says there've been no incidences of material fraud, irregularities or corruption discovered or reported during the year. I was just wondering, I understand that, but sometimes materiality can be based on the frequency of small audits, small frauds and things. Are you quite comfortable that that isn't the case in this instance?
We would be looking for trends if we were having potential fraud reported to us. So that is something that we do monitor. So if we had any concerns, they would be highlighted and obviously investigated.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from members? Okay, I just had one question. I can see that no management responses are outstanding, but what assurance do you have over whether the recommendations that you make have actually been carried out and cleared off? Do you look for evidence on that? Do you track that? Could you say a bit about that, please? Thanks.
Yes, so there's two parts to it. So there are some audits that we audit every year, for example, key financial systems. So we would pick up recommendations as part of that process. So the recommendations made previously, we actually follow up and obtain evidence to confirm that they're being addressed and they're operating as prescribed. And we also have provision within the internal audit plan itself to review any high risk and very high risk concerns that we've identified through the course of our audits. And we generally follow those up after 6 months. Obviously, it depends on the nature of the actual concern, but we do have that process and we do keep a database of all those recommendations that we follow up.
Thank you. Would it be feasible to bring the high risk of recommendations outstanding to this committee in terms of the numbers and the types of recommendations, just so that we've got, again, a bit more visibility about which ones are outstanding and how long they've been outstanding?
Yeah, I mean,
could incorporate?
I would generally report back to the audit committee. So if we did our follow-up work after 6 months and there were concerns that were still outstanding, again, we've got the mechanism that we'd report in my progress reports to the audit committee. So you would be kept updated. And if there's any, risk that wasn't being addressed that we thought was of real concern, we'd raise that through the CLT process, first of all, to try and address what the issue was. And then obviously, if it still wasn't being dealt with, we have that facility to come through to the audit committee. So would that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps we could discuss it outside the meeting.
Yeah.
I'm sort of looking at whether we could have it, at this point in time, these are all the high risk recommendations that are still outstanding and this is how long.
Yeah.
But perhaps we could discuss that outside the meeting.
Yeah, that's fine.
Councillor Kaiser.
Thank you. I mean, it looks very comprehensive. The only thing that's missing, which I'm surprised There doesn't seem to be any audit of any purchasing, letting contracts, that type of thing. I mean, we seem to take an inordinate amount of time to let contracts, and we have had some problems with some of the contracts that we've let in the past. One jumps to mind, I'm sure I don't have to mention it and everybody knows about it. But there doesn't seem to be any auditing action around purchasing.
Well, we do have in the audit plan for this financial year, 22-23, an audit on contract management, client and contract management. So that should pick it up through there.
Okay, that's fine if you're including that, but I think it's an important part of what the council does.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. Again,
okay, thank you.
Just to note. Right, which brings us to the last item on the agenda, which is the forward programme. So we've got the next meeting's on the 27th of July. There's quite a few items on there. Then 28th September and 30th of November. Any comments or questions on the forward programme? Are we happy with that as the forward programme? Obviously, we make a note from earlier, as Councillor Davis pointed out, that the September meeting may need to be changed depending on what's happening with the accounts. Any comments from members? Councillor Davis?
Just a small request, because I assume the complaints and compliments update, if I've read that correctly, that seems slightly odd title. I'm presuming that's an update to a policy similar to what we just received here.
I believe it's actually a more of a narrative report about what complaints and what compliments we've actually had in that period.
I was about to say, yeah, can we circulate it beforehand? Otherwise, no, that's fine.
That's what it is, yeah. Okay, in terms of the date of the next meeting, I notice it's in school holidays again. Can I just check that all members here can actually make that date of the 27th and no one's away at that time? So sorry?
My children are in school.
Okay, we're all happy with that date of the 27th. Yeah, okay. Any other comments on the forward programme? Are we happy with that? Oh, yes.
Yes.
Sorry.
Chair, I was going to suggest that we have a progress report scheduled for the 27th of July meeting. Given the quite tight turnaround between the end of June and producing the report and going through the reporting channels, whether that might be best deferred through to the September meeting.
Okay, are members happy with that? Yep. Okay, that's fine. We can defer that to the September meeting then.
Just ask the question that, will we still get, prior to that, will we get access to some of these audit reports which are finishing? So we, or not?
Yeah, so I think we agreed that from this point onwards, any final reports would be circulated to this committee. So once it's all been totally agreed by management and finalised, we would see a copy of it from this point onwards. Yep. Okay. Right, I think that's the last item on the agenda, so I'll close the meeting at that point. Thank you very much, everyone.